Ellis Johnson, who joins us to analyze college football every Thursday. Good morning, Coach.
Good morning. Tuscaloosa is going to be one mass of crazy fans. And
yeah, it's going to be nuts. I'm telling you, you probably, as a coach, of course, you would have to be focused on the game. But as a broadcaster, I like the games. I'm not a fan of all this other mess. But it's going to be logistically a nightmare on Saturday. But it's all about the football game. That's what's bringing all this attention, and rightfully so. You've got the number 1 and 2 ranked teams in the country in the polls, and then you set number 2 and number 3 in the college football playoff rankings, both unbeaten. Clearly, the winner of this game is going to be in the catbird seat as far as making it to Atlanta. The loser won't be out of it, but we'll have a tougher path to try to get to the playoff. But this game's got it all. 2 unbeaten teams, 2 high-powered offenses, 2 Heisman candidates at quarterback. Defenses that way, maybe while not statistically or where they've been in the past, they have great athletes across the board. I mean, this is why we love college football, Coach.
It sure is. And the thing about this game, obviously a big game, but whoever wins it gets the tough task of playing Georgia for the SEC championship and trying to remain undefeated
Sure.
and stay in the playoff hunt. And the other team, and the benefit of being in a tough conference, could lose this game, especially if it's a close, hard-fought game. They could lose it and still be in the picture for the playoffs, as it happened with Alabama-LSU 4, 5, 6 years ago. And, of course, I think that's the year Alabama got in, not beating LSU, and then later winning the national championship. So, anyhow, it's kind of a deja vu all over again. But these really are 2 great football teams, and I'm glad it seems that Tua's healthy. I hope both teams will be as healthy as they possibly can be, and it'll be a great game because it's certainly been hyped up, and it's worth all the hype it builds up to it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and I think you're right. I mean, Coach Saban said last night that he won't make a decision on Tua until Saturday, but he's practicing. He's looked good in practice from what we've been able to see during the media viewing periods, and I think most people's expectation is that he will play. Matchup-wise, let's start with LSU's offense against Alabama's defense, and Coach Orgeron had said since he got there that he wanted to open things up. It just didn't happen until this season when he brought Joe Brady in, a young, energetic, bright assistant from the Saints who has employed the spread. And with Joe Burrow, they're doing it, not only doing it, Coach, but they're doing it as well as just about anybody. And first of all, have you seen anybody do it this quickly, this well? And secondly, what's Alabama's defense going to have to do or employ to try to slow them down?
Well, I guess, it's 50% scheme and Brady and, getting a system in there that fits Burrow and the other talent they have in that offense. I think you'd have to say that's part of the reason. And then I think it's Joe Burrow. And again, you could put him in some schemes and he'd be pretty average, but you put him in what they're doing with him in Brady's system, and he's absolutely devastating. I think the key to the game overall is going to be which quarterback gets enough pressure, can be forced into making a mistake, because not only are they both producing so many great plays, neither one of them make real bad plays. And that's huge when you're talking about a big game like this. Whichever defense can possibly force the other quarterback into making a few mistakes is probably going to have a heck of a chance to win it.
For Alabama defensively, they're athletic. They can run. We've talked about the inexperience at the inside linebacker position, but now those guys have played 8 games. You've tried to slow down these type of offenses in the past as a coordinator. I guess you can't take away everything. What do you try to do schematically to make sure your players are in the best position to be successful?
Well, I think the first thing, you're going to have to get pressure on Burrow. And it's only one thing that he's not great at. He's not extremely mobile. So I think they've got a better chance of getting to him than does LSU getting to Tua, if Tua's healthy. I thought Coach Saban said something that probably slipped through on his press conference yesterday, kind of long-winded about Tua, but he said, everything looks great moving around on the practice field, but there's no defensive end chasing him and falling on him. So it's different when you get in a game and there's live bullets. But if he's got his mobility, that's a huge advantage in trying to protect him over LSU trying to protect Joe Burrow. So I would look to see if they can get any pressure on him and kind of get him out of his, get him off the point and get him out of his rhythm. They both have unbelievably good core of receivers, many guys that they can get the ball spread around to, and that makes it almost impossible to play some scheme where you take a player out of the game. If you play too much man on Alabama, you got too many bad matchups. You play zone, there's too much space, and you can't hardly catch those guys once they catch it. LSU, they spread the ball so well. They make any throw on the field, and so you're never safe in any area on the field. Joe Burrow gets time.
And they've got Allaire at running back, which really complements what they do with the spread. And then you got this short, compact, powerful running back that can hit it in there between the tackles. And if you're all spread out, he pops one between the line of scrimmage, and he can go for big yards. So that really gives them an added impact offensively, the fact that they have a good running game.
Absolutely. You got two coordinators with NFL backgrounds. They know how to throw the football to backs. They know how to use tight ends. They know how to use formations to keep you from getting your hands on the receivers coming off the line and getting them up into the routes effectively. So it's going to be exciting, I think. And unless, sometimes these big games, something will go wrong and the two teams just don't play that well and not at their best. But if they're not sloppy, they don't make a bunch of mistakes, a bunch of penalties or turnovers, I just think we're going to see one of the most exciting games in college football in many, many years.
On the other side, LSU's defense has got to deal with Alabama, and we know what Alabama's got. If Tua plays in the game, he can distribute the football. They've got four of the best wide receivers in the country. Forrestall, the tight end, is out with an injury, but they can use their backs not only to run, but in the passing game. They can hit you short. They can hit you long. They also can run the football. LSU defensively, what do they need to try to do to limit Alabama?
Yeah, you've mentioned it twice now, and I haven't emphasized it, but the running backs for both these teams are phenomenal. They just don't get the attention right now because their offenses are so explosive in the passing game. But they both got dynamic running backs. And backs that can really get first downs on third and short, too. But I think the way LSU, they've got to somehow, if Tua's got his mobility, they've got to somehow keep him from making extended plays. That's where he really hurts people so bad. Saban talking about him occasionally. He extends the play too much because he never wants to give up on a play. But that is very hard to contend with as a defensive unit. And if they could somehow keep him from extending pass plays, that will minimize, I think, the big plays. Just in general, and it's certainly not an overall approach, I would try to play as much zone as I could and keep my eyes on where that ball is going because they're so devastating if they get in a bad matchup and they get one of those receivers. And, of course, Tua is accurate, and then also he can extend the play, and nobody can cover these guys. Half the time you can't cover them throughout the first part of the play. If it gets extended, it's impossible to keep up with these receivers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's get to some intangibles, Coach. And clearly LSU's a great program, have been now for, going on 20 years themselves. And, of course, have a lot of tradition prior to that, but really have been outstanding since Saban got there and kind of got them to that next level. Won a national championship with Miles, but they have not been quite to this level now in a few years where, they're being mentioned as, a national championship contender. They're unbeaten late in the year, and this is really Coach Orgeron coming to fruition, what he predicted when he became the head coach there. But still, they have been talking a lot about this game, going back to after they beat Auburn, going into their bye week. Their fan base is as pumped as I've ever seen them. But for Alabama, this is kind of old hat. I mean, this is what they do every year. They play in these kind of games. They play in playoff games and in SEC championship games and national championship games. Do you worry on the LSU side, if you're the coaching staff, about limiting the emotion and making sure that your football team hasn't peaked? They're not ready to play today, and they don't peak too soon and keep their emotions in check. Whereas with Alabama, I don't think Saban has to worry about that too much. Is that an advantage for Alabama, just the experience of kind of doing this every year?
It could be, and I think when you bring that up, you talk about what coaches are on the staffs who have been through this before, and certainly Saban's been through it many times. Coach Orgeron is not, but I've been totally impressed, and I've said it, for 2 years we've been doing this. He has done a tremendous job when they weren't exactly on target and were not playing their best, and he kept that football team focused when the things were getting a little bumpy, and some people questioned whether he was the right guy. I think he's done a phenomenal job down there with the so-called head coach duties of keeping the football team focused, disciplined, not too high, not too low. So I don't think anybody will be flat coming in the game. If they play the best ball game, I mean, who knows? But that's a lot of players on that Alabama team who have been through this before. There's some on the LSU team that have. As a coaching staff, I think probably Alabama's got several more that have been through it. And the biggest thing is they'll be excited. I mean, a game like this, the players are going to be excited. They probably had great emotion, awareness, and enthusiasm at practice. The thing you have to do is keep them focused on what they've got to do. Not let, like you said, not let emotion, either bad or good, get you out of thinking about what you got to do the next play. It's always about the next play.
Who do you favor here? I mean, it's LSU feels like that this is the team. Ed Ogeron said this is by far the best equipped that we've been in a long time to beat Alabama, to have the type of season that we're having. This is my best team. For Alabama, there's a lot of talk that this is a really good team, but it's not one of Saban's best teams. So, looking at it from that standpoint, is this the right time for LSU, or do you think Alabama still has enough to hold them off?
Well, I would say also another fact. I think LSU's played a tougher slate so far.
Yes, no doubt.
And they've only been challenged maybe once. That could be a factor when they get in this game. Now, Alabama players have certainly played against good competition. Those guys, this is a group of guys that at least 60% of them have been through the playoffs. So that's not going to be a total shock. But I don't think they've played anybody close to LSU's balance in all areas of the game, especially their offensive ability to put up points and make big plays. I think how Alabama handles that, when the big plays happen, and I feel like LSU will get their share. How are you going to handle it? Is it going to rattle you? Is it going to frustrate you? Because a lot of people haven't had those kind of plays on Alabama, and LSU's probably going to get a few. On the other hand, they're at home, and if Tua is healthy, I think if he's healthy, the bigger difference in these two teams is the mobility of the Alabama quarterback and the ability to extend plays. It's interesting to see if either front, without a lot of blitzing, can put pressure on the other quarterback. I think that'll be a huge, huge thing. But I think that tougher schedule could serve LSU well, especially going into a hostile environment like Tuscaloosa. But right now, I favor Alabama in a close one. But I think it's obviously that's flip a coin and pick one.
Well, you kind of alluded to it. For Alabama, this is, I said this on my sportscast on TV this week. Quite frankly, the schedule to this point just has not excited many people. It's been kind of a yawner. So now I think Alabama fans are pumped, too, to have this game here. It is going to be crazy. Coach, let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to get into some other teams. Obviously, Georgia has righted the ship, beating Florida. They're now back in line to represent the East, and you called this one. We're going to talk about Tennessee. I just about was ready to throw them under the bus, and they came in here to Tuscaloosa and played a pretty good game and took that momentum, beat South Carolina, handled UAB, and now they're in position to get to a bowl game. So I'm going to ask you about the job Jeremy Pruitt's doing as well when we come back on the other side. Visiting with the coach, Ellis Johnson, another segment of SEC football discussion right after this. Schedule plays out. They knew they were going to get opportunities. They held off Kentucky, and then they win the big one against Florida. Now they're in the catbird seat in the East Division, and everything's still in front of them. If they beat Missouri this weekend, then Auburn, then Texas A&M, and of course Georgia Tech in the non-conference game at the end of the season, which they're going to win easily. They're in Atlanta playing for a spot in the college football playoff. So I guess it's nice to be able to take a loss at home and still have the entire season uninterrupted as far as them reaching their goal, which is to get to Atlanta and win the SEC championship and get in the college football playoff. It's all still there for the Georgia Bulldogs. Just the fact that Georgia lost at home to South Carolina, but by winning against Florida, they're right back on track. They went out here in the regular season, get to Atlanta, win the SEC championship game. They're going to be in the college football playoff.
Absolutely. And I don't know, it almost makes you scratch your head about the South Carolina game to see them play so well. I thought on defense they were phenomenal. And
yeah.
I said going in, I thought Florida was playing more consistently over the weeks, but Georgia had so much athleticism and just some dynamic players on both sides. I thought their defense was phenomenal. And they really controlled the football game for the most part, created some field position issues and other things, time of possession, some things I think just Florida couldn't overcome. But Fromm played better. The Defense stopped the run. Their offense was 12 of 18 on third down. I mean, it's hard to beat somebody when they're playing that well. They still got Auburn, and which is always tough at Auburn. But they are in control of their destiny now, and I look for them to probably, almost. I don't see anybody slipping in the back door in the East now.
Tennessee, and I got to give you some props. You continued to say that you thought Jeremy could get the ship righted. I had my doubts. They are at Kentucky this weekend. This is a big game for both these teams, but you look at Tennessee's schedule now, and they've got Kentucky, the bye, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. They're sitting here at 4-5. They've just got to win 2 of those 3 to be bowl eligible. And they're playing good football now. I mean, it started with the loss to Alabama, but they've kind of carried that momentum on, and they look like a different football team to me.
Well, defensively, I think they've been tough most of the year, and I think their offense has just put them in so many bad situations they couldn't overcome it. They did give up big plays at the end against Georgia State, gave up a big play at the end, I think, with BYU, lost some close games, but overall didn't play that bad in the game, just made some bad mistakes at the end of the games. But their defense now is really playing well enough that they could run the table on these 3 games. On the other hand, I think this is 3 pretty even games. Kentucky, Missouri, Vandy. Vandy's not as good on offense, but all 3 of those teams are capable of beating Tennessee. Tennessee could win all 3, but as you said, I've always had the confidence, Jeremy. Number one, he hired a tremendous staff, and then he made some changes and even made it stronger. And I've got a couple of ex-players from South Carolina working in the strength room up there for our ex-strength coach at South Carolina, and they've always told me positive things about what was going on internally. Mm-hmm. So that I'm glad to see him get it turned around. If Tennessee makes another change, I just don't know if they're ever going to get out of this thing. So they need to leave him alone, let him get this thing solid. He's recruiting better. And if they can get in a bowl game this year, I think he'll have it, cross the threshold. It's still a long way to go to get back to the top of the league. But I think he's done a good job getting it back to where they can be competitive again.
You mentioned you sometimes you just have to be careful when you get into this coaching carousel of just hiring and firing. Willie Taggart at Florida State, and I understand if you feel like he's not the right guy, maybe not limping along with him, any longer, but to not even let him finish the season, to go ahead and pull the plug the way they did in his second year. Did that surprise you?
A little bit, Gary. I tell you what, it's gotten the timing on recruiting and other issues.
Yeah.
It's gotten to where there is no good time to fire a coach.
Right.
If you fire him in the middle of the year, at least you can focus on the next hire, get some things. You can use it in recruiting. Hey, we're making a change. Let's see who's going to be. It could hurt recruiting, too. You just never know. But to wait till the end of the season, it seems to me it's a little bit more normal to do that. But at the same time, by that time, you got a signing date about a week away. And so it's kind of crazy now with all the big money in it. That's what's forcing them to have to pay players because the coaches are making so much money. And when you get all this money and the fans aren't coming to the stadium and they're raising cane, it's just hard not to make a change. The stockholders are getting ready to quit. Mm-hmm. Don't change, we're not coming back. So it's just crazy. It's big business now. I don't know if there is a right time to do it, but if you know he's not your guy, I tell you one thing I don't like is when they fire a coach and leave him in there to finish the season.
Yeah, that's no good.
Those are not good. I've been involved in those. They're not good.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, final minute. Speaking of that, Chad Morris at Arkansas, and they haven't won an SEC game in his tenure. They haven't won one since 2017. They got blown out at home by Mississippi State this past Saturday, and this speaks to what we're discussing. You can't keep changing coaches. It's hard to find the right guy. Everybody's not going to win. That's just the mathematics of it. But if you don't think he's the guy, and a lot of Arkansas people that I've talked to don't think that he is, do you give him another year? Or even though you're paying Bielema, you're going to be paying him, or do you go ahead and pull the plug and try to find the right guy? I mean, what do you think of that situation at Arkansas? Because it seems like it's going nowhere.
I don't know on the outside. I totally agree. There are 2 things, and there's no way I could evaluate this. There are 2 things I think you look at in this situation. Number one, are they recruiting well? Because if they are, they'll get it turned. And number 2, does he have the locker room? And it's not hard to get the bead on that over the weeks players, you can tell whether a football team still believes in that coach and wants to fight for that coach and does not want to change. And when you're this bad on the football field, I think it comes down to those two areas. So you bring in better players and getting the thing turned around with talent, and do you still have control of this football team? And that's all I could even offer on that. I'm shocked about it. I think it's been proved at a lot of places over the years. A coach can come from Hawaii and be successful in Ole Miss if he just seems to fit in. But sometimes coaches don't fit, and it's more in terms of recruiting and recruiting areas. It can be very different recruiting the West Coast or recruiting the Northeast or recruiting the Deep South. And if you have no experience in those areas, sometimes it doesn't fit well.
Going to be interesting. It's a lot of pressure to win in college football now with what these guys make. And you're right, the stockholders, if you will, the folks that pull the purse strings, they're not very patient. Great stuff as always, Coach. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good, Gary. Sounds good, Gary. Sounds good, Gary.